It feels like I just got flashbanged in a game of Call of Duty. I can't see, and all I can hear is a 12-year-old yelling, "Get wrecked," in my ear. Ugh. Hey. This isn't bad. I like the new shelf. It's bigger, it's sleek, it's more organized. It shows off all the books, DVDs, and all the nerd stuff that I've been trying to show off since I started the show. I like it. Now, obviously, we're not reinventing the channel. We're still going to review books, television shows, video games, movies, and any weird adaptations Hollywood brings us. But I figured if I'm going to review things from page to screen, the studio could probably take a leap. Now, we're going to try and get through this review without getting flashbanged again. Hopefully. Roll the intro. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Big Screen Leap, the show where we take stories from words, pencils, and scripts and see how they land as Hollywood hits. I'm your host, William Redmond. Today, we're heading to the racetrack. But not just any racetrack, we're diving into the incredibly true story about an undersized horse with an oversized heart. We're talking about the 1999 nonfiction book, Seabiscuit, An American Legend by Laura Hillenbrand, and its 2003 film adaptation starring Tobey Maguire, Jeff Bridges, and Chris Cooper. Again, this is one of those rare Big Screen Leap episodes where we're not talking about fantasy. Instead, we're talking about history. Real people, real heartbreak, real triumph, and a very grumpy, snack-loving racehorse. So the real question is, when Hollywood took this heavily researched nonfiction story about Depression-era America and turned it into a sweeping sports drama, was the leap worth it? Well, let's find out. Saddle up and let's break out of the gate, starting with the plot. So when we look at the book, it's not just a biography about a racehorse. Instead, Hillenbrand builds the book around three important people and one very important racehorse. We start off first with Charles Howard, who starts off as a bicycle mechanic in San Francisco. He then transitions into selling automobiles, eventually becoming a powerful person for Buick. But then tragedy hits the Howard family. His young son dies in a car accident. The irony here is absolutely brutal. A man who built his fortune on automobiles loses his child to one. Because of this, his marriage falls apart, and soon, Charles becomes emotionally adrift. He starts to get into horse racing, and soon, it doesn't just become a hobby, but a new reason to live. The book spends a significant amount of time in Howard's emotional psychology. We're then introduced to the horse trainer Tom Smith. He's quiet, intuitive, and deeply respectful of horses. He doesn't believe in dominating horses, but instead understanding them. The book goes deep into horse behavior science, how horses think, how they bond, and how trauma affects them. Smith sees potential in Seabiscuit when everybody else sees a lazy failure. Why? Because Seabiscuit isn't lazy, he's bored. But we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Next, we meet the jockey, Red Pollard, who's probably the most layered character in the book. His story is the most expansive. His family collapses financially, he's separated from his parents. Not only does he ride horses, but he also boxes. He reads literature obsessively, he writes poetry, he rides injured, but probably the biggest thing about Red is that he does all this while being partially blind. That's right, partially blind. The book details greatly how Pollard had significant vision loss in one eye. That detail matters. He and Seabiscuit form a mirrored arc. Both are overworked, underestimated, and both carry invisible damage. Their bond isn't just professional, it's psychological. Finally, we meet our racehorse. In the book, we look at his early life. As a 2-year-old, he's constantly raced, causing him to have burnout, and constantly gets mismanaged. The book details his pedigree. He was the grandson of Man of War, who's considered the greatest horse of the 20th century, which meant that Seabiscuit should have been elite. But unfortunately, he underperforms early and is written off, until Tom Smith comes in and reconditions him both physically and mentally. Here, we get some more of the behavior science for horses, and we find out Seabiscuit isn't lazy, he's just bored, and he wants a challenge. Now, here's where Hillenbrand shines, the racing strategy explanations. In the book, she goes over pace setting, weight handicapping, track surfaces, rival psychology. This isn't just horse go fast, this is chess at 40 miles an hour. We then build up to the biggest race of the book, War Admiral versus Seabiscuit. War Admiral is the horse from the East Coast who is the Triple Crown champion, which means that he's won the 3 biggest horse races, the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness Stakes, and the Belmont Stakes, all in the same season. Seabiscuit, the scrappy West Coast challenger, plans to race War Admiral to see who truly is the best. It ends up becoming symbolic. East Coast upper class versus Western grit. The race is broadcasted nationally on radio, 40 million listeners tune in, and Seabiscuit ends up beating War Admiral. The book captures every stride, every shift in momentum. It's read like a thriller. But then, when things are going good, devastation hits. Both Seabiscuit and Red suffer severe injuries, sidelining both horse and rider, and the book does not rush the recovery. It details the medical procedures, bone fractures, rehabilitation methods, and psychological recovery. The comeback eventually culminates in Seabiscuit and Red winning the Santa Ana Handicap. The emotional payoff feels earned because the suffering was real and detailed. The film condenses 400 plus pages of research into a tight, emotionally driven 2-hour arc. The movie opens with newsreel footage and narration. It establishes the Great Depression visually rather than academically. We quickly meet Charles Howard, played by Jeff Bridges. We see his rise in the automobile industry. We then see his son's death. It's brief, but impactful. We then see his emotional isolation. The film trims a lot of detail about Howard, but sharpens up his arc. Howard hires Tom Smith, played by Chris Cooper. He's portrayed as stoic and almost mythic. The movie leans into the archetype of the quiet cowboy trainer. We're then introduced to Red Pollard, played by Tobey Maguire, who's portrayed as passionate and impulsive. The film trims down Pollard quite a bit. In the movie, we don't really see him into literature and writing poetry like we do in the book, but they keep his fighting spirit, his unwavering loyalty, and his vision loss intact. These 3 end up becoming the emotional triangle of the movie, with Seabiscuit holding them together. We see a lot of the races, and the movie uses slow motion, close-ups, golden lighting, and swelling orchestra music to keep the audience interested. It avoids overwhelming viewers with all the technical jargon. Instead of explaining handicapping weight math, it shows tension through reaction shots and crowd noises, which makes it more accessible, but less educational. Like the book, we get the build-up to the War Admiral race, which includes political tension, negotiations over starting gates, and media frenzy. The race itself is edited for maximum emotional payoff. We get close-ups of the jockeys' faces, close-up of the hooves, we get Howard yelling, the crowd gasping. It truly is a masterclass in making a sports movie. We get the injury to Seabiscuit and Red, but unlike the book, the film condenses the recovery timelines. However, Pollard's injuries are dramatized for maximum emotional impact. Like the book, the Santa Ana comeback becomes the emotional climax. The ending leans triumphant, hopeful, and cathartic. Cue the music, cue the tears, cue the horse hug, cue the credits. So with the book not being written until 1999, one must ask how the author got all their information. Well, let's get into the book production and find out. One of the reasons Seabiscuit, an American Legend, became such a phenomenon is because the story behind the book is as inspiring as the story of Seabiscuit. When Laura Hillenbrand first became interested in Seabiscuit, she wasn't a horse racing expert. In fact, she stumbled upon the horse's story while researching a magazine article. The more she learned, the more she realized that Seabiscuit wasn't merely a successful racehorse, he was a lens through which you could view an entire era of American history. Hillenbrand quickly discovered that Seabiscuit's story wasn't just about a horse winning races, it was about the Great Depression, with loss, second chances, and a country desperately looking for something to believe in. What made the project even more remarkable was Hillenbrand's personal circumstances. She suffered from severe chronic fatigue syndrome, an illness that often left her unable to leave her home. There were periods where she was confined to her bed and could barely function physically. Most authors researching a historical book spend years traveling to archives, museums, racetracks, and interview locations. Hillenbrand couldn't. But instead of letting her illness drag her down, she built one of the most extensive remote research projects of the late 20th century. She spent years gathering thousands of newspaper articles, racing forums, track records, personal letters, government archives, medical records, family photographs, interviews with descendants, and interviews with people who had known the principles involved. This was particularly challenging because most of the key figures had already passed away. Seabiscuit died in 1947, Charles Howard in 1951, Tom Smith in 1964, and Red Pollard in 1981. Hillenbrand essentially had to reconstruct an entire world from fragments, basically turning her into something of a historical detective. One of the things that separates the book from a traditional sports biography is the level of detail she uncovered. She didn't simply tell readers what happened, she explained how horse racing operated during the 1930s, how betting systems worked, how jockeys trained, how trainers conditioned horses, how injuries were treated, how transportation affected racing schedules, and how newspapers covered sporting events. The amount of contextual information is staggering. The research process reportedly lasted several years before the manuscript was completed. One of Hillenbrand's greatest strengths as a writer is her ability to make historical facts feel like dramatic scenes. Instead of reading like a textbook, the book reads like an adventure novel. When discussing Red Pollard's childhood, the writing feels like a coming-of-age story. When discussing Charles Howard's tragedy, it feels like family drama. When describing races, it feels like a thriller. And when Seabiscuit finally defeats War Admiral, it feels like the climax of a sports movie, even though readers already know the outcome. When the book was published in 1999, it immediately received widespread critical acclaim. Reviewers praised the depth of research, the narrative structure, the emotional storytelling, the historical accuracy, the accessibility for readers unfamiliar with horse racing. The book quickly climbed bestseller lists. What surprised many observers is how broad the audience became. Horse racing fans loved it, history fans loved it, sports fans loved it, people who have never watched a horse race loved it. The book spent months on the bestsellers list and eventually sold millions of copies. It also won numerous awards and established Hillenbrand as one of America's premier nonfiction writers. Perhaps most importantly, the book resurrected Seabiscuit's legacy for a whole new generation. When Hollywood came calling to make a movie after the book's success, there was a major challenge. How do you adapt a book that's basically 4 biographies, a history of horse racing, and a history of Depression-era America, all into a 2-hour movie? Well, that responsibility fell to director Gary Ross. Ross was already known for balancing emotional storytelling with historical settings, and he understood immediately that the film simply couldn't be about horse races. Don't get me wrong, the races mattered. It's just that the people mattered more. Ross's first major decision was determining what the emotional core of the film would be. The book jumps between several major figures and often pauses to explain historical context. That works brilliantly in a book. It's a little tougher for a movie. So Ross streamlined the story around 3 primary characters: Charles Howard, Tom Smith, Red Pollard, with Seabiscuit serving as the thread connecting them. The screenplay went through extensive development as Ross worked to condense hundreds of pages into a film that would still feel emotionally complete. One of the major challenges was the horse racing. In person, it can be exciting. Trying to get it on film? It's a little difficult. Most races last less than 2 minutes. If filmed poorly, Audiences simply see a group of horses running together. Ross needed viewers to understand positioning, strategy, rivalries, momentum shifts, and stakes without becoming confused. To solve this, the production developed a visual language that emphasized hooves striking dirt, jockey movements, breathing, muscle strain, and crowd reactions. The races were designed to feel personal rather than technical. Before filming began, actors underwent extensive preparation. Maguire spent significant time learning riding techniques. The cast studied racing footage, historical photographs, personal accounts, jockey behavior, and Depression-era mannerisms. The horse itself presented another challenge. No single horse portrayed Seabiscuit. Multiple horses were used throughout the production. Different horses were selected depending on the scene requirements. Some horses excelled at racing sequences, others worked better for close-ups, others handled interaction scenes more effectively. One of the most impressive aspects of the film is its cinematography. The visual style emphasizes warm golden colors and sweeping landscapes. The filmmakers wanted the movie to feel like an old American photograph brought to life. Many scenes look almost nostalgic, even when viewed today. The film premiered in 2003 and became both a critical and commercial success. Critics praised the performances, the emotional storytelling, the cinematography, the historical recreation, the inspirational tone. It grossed well over $140 million worldwide, earned 7 Academy Award nominations, and introduced Seabiscuit's story to millions who never would have picked up the book. Much like the book before it, the movie didn't just tell history, it made people care about history. And honestly, that's probably the biggest win that both versions could achieve. Probably the biggest similarity is that both versions essentially tell the same story. Both versions include Charles Howard's rise as an automobile businessman, the death of his son, Tom Smith discovering Seabiscuit's potential, Red Pollard becoming Seabiscuit's primary jockey, Seabiscuit's rise through the racing ranks, the race with War Admiral, the injuries suffered by both horse and rider, their eventual comeback, the Santa Anita handicap victory. The skeleton of the story remains remarkably intact. If somebody were to go watch the movie and then read the book, they would see major moments in both of them. Next, both focus on being an underdog story. Actually, when you think about it, it's multiple underdog stories happening at the same time. Charles Howard appears successful on the surface, but emotionally, he's broken. Tom Smith is viewed as outdated by many trainers. His methods seem strange. He talks to horses, he studies horses, he trusts horses. Many racing insiders thought he was being eccentric. Turns out, he was just ahead of the time. Probably the biggest underdog story of all time is Red Pollard, and honestly, whether you read or watch his story, you can see why. Red has every reason to quit. He's poor, injured, partially blind. He keeps getting knocked down, but yet he continues to get back up. Then you have Seabiscuit himself. He's small, considered lazy, stubborn, and slow, at least according to everyone else. The horse spends his entire career proving people wrong. Both the book and movie place these underdog stories front and center. Probably the best accomplishment of both versions is that they both treat Seabiscuit as a character. Seabiscuit never speaks. Could you imagine that? Hey, Red! I think we can beat War Admiral. Yeah, no, we're not doing that. Yet both versions make him feel like a fully developed character. The audience learns his habits, his moods, his preferences, his quirks, his competitive nature. He develops a personality. You don't just root for him because he's fast. You root for him because you know him. The most important achievement of both versions is showing why Seabiscuit mattered. He wasn't simply a successful horse. He became a symbol. The Great Depression had devastated America. Millions were unemployed, families were losing homes, businesses were collapsing, people desperately wanted something positive, and Seabiscuit became that positive story. The book explores through historical analysis, the movie shows it through visuals and emotional storytelling. Different methods, but the same result. Now let's talk about the changes, and surprisingly, there are quite a few. Probably the biggest difference is the book is much bigger than the movie. The movie is about 2 hours long, the book covers an entire era. The film focuses on our four characters, the book goes far beyond that. Hillenbrand explores horse breeding, racing economics, jockey culture, Depression era America, transportation, gambling, race promotion. The book feels like a history lesson wrapped inside a sports story. The movie feels like a sports story wrapped inside a history lesson. Next, Red Pollard is much more complex in the book. The film portrays Pollard as determined and courageous. The book portrays him as much more fascinating. He loves to read, he writes poetry, he discusses philosophy. He's actually quite intelligent, and those aspects are pretty much absent from the movie. The film focuses on his athletic struggles. The book explores his entire personality. The result is that Pollard feels more layered and nuanced on the page. Next, Tom Smith doesn't get as much attention in the movie as he did in the book. In the book, it detailed his childhood, his experiences with wild horses, his observation of animal behavior, and his unconventional training methods. The movie shows us that Smith is gifted. The book explains why. The racing strategy is much different from book to movie. The book dives more into the technical side of racing, but the movie ends up trimming a lot of this. Instead of explaining strategy, the movie focuses on emotional stakes. Speaking of races, the rivalry between War Admiral and Seabiscuit is much more detailed in the book. In the book, it explains War Admiral's history along with his Triple Crown campaign. The movie condenses a lot of this, and as a result, War Admiral feels almost mythological. One thing that Hollywood loves is a comeback, but what they also love is shortening comebacks, and that's what it did with Seabiscuit and Red's recovery. In the book, the readers learn about the medical treatments, the physical therapy, the training setbacks, and the emotional struggles. The movie compresses months of rehabilitation into a much shorter sequence, but the book better conveys just how difficult it really was. Finally, this may be the most significant difference overall. The movie uses the Depression as a backdrop. The book treats it as a major character. Hillenbrand constantly reminds readers of what was happening to America at this time. She connects Seabiscuit's popularity to economic hardship, national morale, media culture, and American identity. The result is that the book often feels like a biography of America as much as a biography of Seabiscuit. So after exploring the history of Seabiscuit, was the leap from page to screen worth it? Absolutely. Not just because both the book and the movie are great, but they both do something that's incredibly difficult. They make you care deeply about a story that, on paper, probably shouldn't have been a best-selling novel or a blockbuster. I mean, think about it. If I walked up to somebody and said, "Hey, do you want to watch a movie about a racehorse from the 1930s? They'd probably look at me and go, maybe literally after anything else. And yet somehow, both the book and movie take that premise and turn it into one of the most compelling underdog stories ever told. That's not easy. In fact, it's incredibly rare. One thing I've noticed in my time so far reviewing adaptations is that the best ones understand the spirit of the original. The worst ones... And yeah, I'll be honest, we haven't really looked at a lot of those. I think I need to fix that. They often become obsessed with recreating events. The best adaptations recreate feelings, and that's exactly what happened here. The movie doesn't preserve every fact, it doesn't preserve every conversation, it doesn't preserve every historical detail, but it preserves the heart. Both the book and movie make you feel inspired. The paths may have been different, but the destination was the same. And honestly, one of the most remarkable things about Seabiscuit is that despite being surrounded by incredible human characters, the horse never gets overshadowed. I mean, think about the competition. You've got a millionaire businessman, a legendary trainer, a courageous jockey, heck, Depression-era America itself. And somehow, the smallest figure in the story becomes the biggest symbol. Seabiscuit wasn't supposed to be a champion, he wasn't supposed to be famous, he wasn't supposed to beat War Admiral, and he definitely wasn't supposed to become an American icon. But he did. And that's why the story still resonates nearly a century later, because everybody loves an underdog, but more importantly,
Everyone sees a little bit of themselves in an underdog.
So where do I land on this? Well, both are great. I think it kind of depends on what you want.
If you truly want a history lesson, then the book is the way to go because it gives you all the details of horse racing, horse training, and Depression-era America. But if you want true emotional storytelling, then the movie is the way to go.
The leap works, not because the book is better than the movie, and not because the movie is better than the book, but they both do something that others just can't. And when they both can stand side by side almost 30 years after their initial release, that's not just a successful adaptation. That is a photo-finish victory. But that's all the time that we have for today. Did you enjoy Seabiscuit? Do you like either the book or the movie? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video you saw today, consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and ringing that notification bell so you're notified next time we post. Until next time, from page to screen and everything in between, this has been the Big Screen Leap. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go challenge a horse to a race. My confidence is very high. My chances of survival, very low. Bye, everyone.
Oh my, ow! Again? Seriously?